I'm a Sagittarius man, right? As man, it's my birthday. I have to understand what is the cause and effect. See a situation 6 months after a situation.
One soft-spoken answer can shake an entire timeline. Offset sat down, sounding calm and centered, then dropped a line about cause and effect and how nobody who walked away from him really leveled up. He didn't point at anyone, he didn't need to. The internet does algebra on silence. Old clips popped back up, subtweets got treated like evidence. Suddenly the old cracks around the Migos felt like they were humming again, and one vague sentence turned into a siren. The question isn't only what he meant, it's why that single moment reopened a story the industry never stopped whispering about. There's a reason that single comment hit different. Fans weren't just hearing shade, they were hearing a credwork trail. Offset's phrasing felt like a dare. If you know, you know, and when a superstar goes half cryptic, everyone else goes full detective. Add in months of public relationship ups and downs, and that cause and effect line becomes a spark in a dry forest. People start connecting dots that might not actually touch, and the story grows its own legs. That's the paradox of celebrity clarity. The clearer you try to be without names, the more people will assign them.
You see what I'm saying? You'll see some shit, cause it's outside. I'm in a public situation, so you gonna see it when you see it, and then your opinion come then.
What gave it extra fuel was the subtext, the idea that past decisions circle back and that timelines expose what private conversations never will. Viewers heard a man talking about growth, but they also heard a man quietly outlining receipts without showing them. It felt intentional, like he handed the audience an unlabeled folder and let them decide what was inside. That's not an admission, but it is an invitation, and in a culture trained to read between the lines, invitations rarely go unanswered. The more he refused to clarify, the more confident the crowd became that they already knew, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. But that wasn't the whole story, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. To understand why this moment echoed, rewind to the clip the whole world saw. In 2021, a surveillance camera inside a North Hollywood elevator captured Quavo and Saweetie in a struggle over a case. It was a jarring watch. The footage spread fast, got debated even faster, and froze a complicated relationship into a few choppy seconds. Later, both called it an unfortunate incident and said they had moved past it by the time the relationship ended. Statements matter, but internet memory is sticky. Once an image lodges in the feed, it replays forever, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. It wasn't just the video, it was the timing around it. The breakup tweets, the quiet unfollows, and the sudden flood of think pieces. One side of the timeline framed it as the final straw, another insisted that the clip had more context than it showed. Whichever angle you chose, the effect was the same. Every later rumor landed harder, and every lyric sounded sharper. That's how a private moment caught without sound becomes a public index for the future. Even when two people try to move forward, the audience doesn't, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. And still, what came next would outlive a single clip, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Then came a bar you could feel in your teeth. On Messy, Quavo rapped about someone who wanted the gang, and should have just said it.
Wanted the gang, you should have just asked for it.
Back to Saweetie, I think he was definitely talking about my...
He never tagged a name, but the internet did. Threads ran miles long, video essays slowed the syllables down, like a crime lab. The line became a theory. The theory became a narrative, and the narrative started to look like fact in the comments despite the lack of a single on-the-record confirmation. That's the power and the danger of a perfect double meaning. It can mean everything and nothing at the same time, which is exactly why it spreads, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Here's what matters for a viewer: speculation isn't truth, but speculation shapes how truth is received. When fans decide a line points to a cousin, the family business stops being private memory and becomes public storyline. Every interaction gets reinterpreted, every cold shoulder becomes evidence. Even a normal spell of creative separation reads like a permanent fracture. That's why this lyric lives rent-free. It didn't settle anything, it simply made the question too loud to ignore. And once a question gets louder than the answer stops mattering, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. And if you think a line can't spill into real life, look at the biggest stage in music, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. At the 2023 Grammys, reports said Quavo and Offset had to be separated backstage before a tribute performance for Takeoff. Some sources claimed Offset tried to join, others said Quavo wasn't with it. Offset went online later to shoot the rumor down. Fans split into camps, each choosing the version that fit the story already in their head. What nobody could miss was the temperature. On a night meant to honor a brother, unity felt out of reach. When grief can't bring people back into the same frame, the audience steps in and writes the ending themselves, and that's why the conversation refuses to die.
How do you deal with that? You just like, I'm
a
man.
human being. You see me say some sometimes,
Yeah.
then I just had to realize it is what it is.
No.
The moment mattered because it reset the floor. If that night couldn't melt the ice, what could? People stopped hoping for an easy fix and started bracing for a long freeze. That's how a maybe we'll reconcile turns into a this might never thaw, and once a feud feels permanent, the internet starts backfilling the reason, replaying every suspicious second, picking winners and villains, and turning sorrow into sport. It's messy, and it makes moving on even harder for the people actually living it. The cruel twist is that every tribute becomes a test of loyalty instead of a moment of healing, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. But the stage wasn't the only place where tension leaked, and that's why the conversation refuses to die.
If I entertain something that I know is not true on the internet, people be like, it is true because you're addressing it. At the end of the day, I know what's going on in my house.
Months later, a fresh round of whispers followed, 2 names into the same glamorous room. Blogs claimed Cardi B and Saweetie crossed paths at Vanity Fair's Oscars after-party and may have traded tense words. Cardi would later hop on live with a not-so-subtle, "I don't play that," and the internet did the rest, writing entire scripts for a conversation nobody filmed. None of it landed as confirmed fact, but the imagery stuck, 2 women orbiting a conflict that wasn't fully theirs, carrying the weight of somebody else's feud, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. That's what makes these moments volatile. Public women are expected to clear the air on demand, even when silence is the healthier choice. Speak, and you risk feeding the fire. Say nothing, and people treat the quiet like a guilty plea. It's a no-win loop that rewards performance over peace. In that loop, a single look gets edited into a storyline, and a cautious sentence becomes proof. The real conversation, if there even was one, shrinks to the size of a caption. The result is theater built from guesses, dressed up as certainty, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Meanwhile, another thread kept reminding everyone why perception matters so much, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. For Saweetie, visibility hasn't just been about songs, it's been about strategy. The McDonald's Saweetie meal, a Crocs collab with icy gibbets, fashion campaigns, game cameos, the brand building was textbook. That kind of mainstream momentum multiplies the stakes. When your name is stamped on billboards and drive-through menus, rumors don't just sting, they get costed out in spreadsheets. A headline can become a hesitation, a messy comment can become a paused call. And the cruel math of marketing is that uncertainty is expensive, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. That spotlight cuts both ways. The same high-profile deals that amplify a win also echo a whisper. You can ignore a subtweet, you can't ignore a quarterly risk review. So even unverified chatter hits like a body shot. If you're Saweetie, maintaining poise becomes part of the product. If you're Quavo, a subliminal isn't just catharsis, it's a stock shock. And if you're Offset, a carefully worded thought on a podcast can read like a press release to people who never heard the full conversation. That's what happens when narrative outruns nuance. What it means gets decided by whoever yells it first, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. And still, the loudest echo didn't come from a brand. It came from the megaphones, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Enter the commentariat. Personalities and blogs repeated the alleged Offset Saweetie storyline, looped in other names, and turned innuendo into trending topics. Here's the trap. Repetition is not verification. But in the attention economy, the chorus can drown out the facts. Fans start remembering events that never fully surfaced. A clip plus a caption becomes a memory. Before long, people talk about rumors like they're timestamps. The narrative hardens, and anyone who asks for receipts gets labeled naive or biased, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. This is where the cousin story keeps living, between what's known and what's narrated, When Offset gives a thoughtful answer, some hear growth, others hear shade. When Quavo drops a bar, some hear truth, others hear theater. The middle. The part where complicated humans process complicated history, rarely trends. What trends is the cleanest angle, the sharpest line, the theory with the strongest hook. The megaphones know that. They package it, we click it, and little by little, speculation becomes the soundtrack, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. So where does that leave the family that built a wave together? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Nobody wins a Cold War. They just outlast each other. Offset's coy lines feed the mystery. Quavo's layered bars feed the theories. The audience connects everything in between, assigning motives and drawing maps for moments that might not be connected at all. Maybe there's a conversation that fixes it behind closed doors. Maybe there isn't. Pride is heavy. History is heavier. And once a brotherhood learns to speak through lyrics and interviews instead of living rooms, the conversation turns into coded messaging, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. What the last few years really proved is simple. A vague sentence can start an avalanche, and once it's moving, the mountain writes the story for you. Whether this all began with a scuffle, a lyric, or a rumor, the price keeps landing on the same place. Trust. Trust between cousins, trust between partners, trust between artists and an audience that wants answers faster than humans can heal. Maybe time cools it down. Maybe a future project forces a sit down, or maybe the distance stays. If that happens, the myth gets bigger than the music, and that becomes the final chapter, whether they want it or not, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Until then, here's a quieter thought about attention. It rewards confidence and punishes nuance. It loves a tidy villain and a perfect victim, even when real life refuses to play either part. So before we crown a culprit, it might be worth asking a softer question, not who broke the bond, but what would it take to repair it? If there's any path back, it probably starts with something that never trends. Real apologies, real boundaries, and a real decision to make music louder than the rumor mill. That's not flashy, but it's the only thing stronger than a rumor, and that's why the conversation refuses to die.